folks. You're listening to the Jobs Podcast. I am your host, Tim Hendricks. Your time is valuable. I'm not going to waste it. Let's get right to the interview. Hey, folks. Thanks for joining me on the Jobs Podcast. Today's guest was a police officer, law enforcement specialist for 25 years, and now he is the U.S. Director of Security and Safety for the Convoy of Hope. Phenomenal organization. So welcome, David. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's just start off by giving us a little history about David and where you were born and just kind of go from there.
Where I was born? Well, it's going back a while. So I was born in Brooklyn, New York. Spent most of my childhood on Long Island. I grew up on Long Island and on the eastern part of Long Island in the Shirley Mastic Beach area. And after I graduated high school, I went to what we used to call the 13th grade. It was our local community college. And so I went there for a year and then transferred to Evangel, then college, now university, which is here in Springfield, Missouri.
What brought you all the way from out there all the way to Springfield?
Yeah, I get that. I get asked that question a lot.
I bet.
There was a connection. So my older sister came to Evangel from there as well, but there was a connection between the church I was going to at the time and Evangel. And so there was a lot of people that went to Evangel from my area. And so it made sense. I knew I wanted to get into law enforcement since high school. And I knew that I started taking criminal justice classes early on, but came to Evangel. And when I came to Evangel, they didn't have a criminal justice major my first year. They were working on building one. So my first year at Evangel, I was a sociology major. And so, but I switched that over to my minor my sophomore year. Well, it would have been my sophomore year. They developed a criminal justice major. So my class was like the first graduating criminal justice degree majors at Evangel.
What was the early influence? You said you wanted to be in law enforcement from an early age, 12 or 13, I think you said. Did you have relatives that were in that line of work, or did you have a mentor or something?
No, it's funny. I didn't have any relatives in law enforcement that I was close to, no mentors, no nothing. When I was in high school, I took an elective, and it was a criminal justice class, a basic criminal justice 101 class. And I was really interested in it. And so it's funny, but that was my light bulb.
Right.
I took that class and I was like, I think I want to do this. And then I went to Suffolk County Community College and took some more criminal justice classes, a couple of more, and never lost interest in it. I thought it was the greatest thing. I never had any police contacts. I think maybe I was pulled over one time with some friends when we were teenagers, but that's really it. I mean, I never had any contacts with law enforcement, didn't really know any. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. A lot of times you hear about my dad was a cop, or my grandpa and my dad were cops, or my brother. And so there's always, it seems like in fire and police specifically, there's a lot of generational pull into that line of work. But I'm similar to you.
It used to be that. Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, I'm similar to you. My dad, I don't have any family members that were in the fire service. It's just when I was younger, I must have watched some TV show, Emergency 911 or something, and just wanted to do it. So.
Yeah, it's funny. We call them legacy cops or firemen or something like that, where it's like the blue bloods thing handed down from generation to. Yeah. You're finding that's way more rare now than it is, just because people that are in law enforcement are. So I have 3 teenage boys, and I'm not pushing any of them to get into law enforcement. If it's what they want to do, and they come to me and they say, "Dad, I want to be a cop,"
Sure.
I'll support them fully,
Mhm.
and I'll have a lot of good guidance for them, but not pushing them towards the job at all.
Right. So you came out here, you went to Evangel. What was, how did that process, how did that work out? And then how did you end up getting into your first job in law enforcement?
So when I was at Evangel, I had the my advisor there was Robert Certain, and he's the one who developed the criminal justice program there. And he kind of guided me along a path I needed to be on. I did some internships. I did an internship with the Mayor's Commission on Human Rights and Community Relations. And then I did an internship with Springfield Police Department. And during the internship, I got to do some ride alongs and some different things like that, which, if anybody's wanting to be a police officer, I strongly encourage they do, just because you see the job on TV, you may think you know what the job is, but a ride along really gives good perspective on what the day to day looks like. And so I did a ride along, and I did some internships in some different areas at the PD, and knew that I just knew without a doubt that's what I wanted to do. So when I graduated, I waited till after I graduated to apply. So I applied in January of 97. There was law enforcement was a lot more competitive back then than it is now. And there was a large number of people that took the test for Springfield. I also took the test for Suffolk County, Long Island, but like 50,000 people took the test at that time for like 1,800 jobs off the top. And so I know, right? I kind of knew I wasn't going to get, I think I was in the top 25%, but I still knew I wasn't going to get a call. So Springfield seemed more feasible, but I think there were still six or 700 that took the test with me in 97.
Yeah.
And they formed the 42nd Police Academy out of that testing group, and I was not a part of it. And so what I should say is, in the meantime, so I graduated, I was working at a car wash, and then I got a job as an assistant manager in a shoe store. Finish Line, if you remember. I don't know if they still have stores nationwide. They don't have one in Springfield anymore,
Yeah, I don't know.
but they had one in the Battlefield Mall, and I was an assistant manager there. And I got a letter that I didn't get the job,
Mhm.
uh, and I was going to apply again. Well, about several months later, they realized that there was more than 25 good applicants from 700. So they created the 43rd Academy class out of that same testing group. So I didn't have to test again,
That's
and I
good.
was a part of that group.
Okay.
And so I started the police academy in March of 1998.
How long is your academy? Okay. Now, if someone, just to do a little rabbit hole for a second, if somebody wants to get into, if they want to become a police officer, is it, is the requirement typically that they have, or is it beneficial to have a 2 or a 4 year criminal justice degree, or is it military time can take the place of some of that?
So it's a combination, and that criteria has lessened over time. So I didn't need a 4-year degree, but I think when I was hired, I needed like 60 college hours to get
Okay.
on. So I think it's a little less right now.
Okay.
So basically, if you did a year or two at OTC, which is our community college here in Springfield,
Mhm.
you could qualify, or military service. And I think maybe 4 years of military service. I can't remember the exact numbers. It's been a minute since I was a part of that process. But if somebody's looking to get into law enforcement now, I would say that you need to get the minimum amount of schooling before you apply.
Okay.
If the question somebody's asking me is, do I need a 4-year degree? You need a 4-year degree, and this is Springfield specific.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of agencies are kind of mimicking each other at this point, but because they're all fighting for the same people, you know.
Hmm.
But in Springfield, you need a 4-year degree to promote past the rank of sergeant. So if you ever wanted to be a lieutenant,
Okay.
you would need a 4-year degree. But the thing about Springfield is they also have a tuition reimbursement program. So if
Hmm.
you got your minimum number of hours, started your career, you could finish your 4-year degree while you were doing the job.
Okay.
And a perk, you could get Springfield to pay for it.
There you go. Do you have to be 21 years of age to be in law enforcement? Is that kind of an industry standard?
You need to be 21 by the time you complete the academy.
Okay. All right.
So I think there's guys that start and they're actually they don't they hit their 21st birthday when they're in the academy. But as long as you're 21 by the time you complete it, you're good to go. I was 23 when I started, so I
Okay.
didn't have to deal with that.
So you got hired in the academy straight from finish line. They had a different academy or a second academy out of that testing group. You're in the academy. You said it takes about 6 months to finish. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's about 6 months. So from March 1998 till August, I think we graduated in August. You're in the academy. It's classroom. It's scenarios. It's physical training, shooting. Everything you think it would be
Right.
is incorporated into that 6 months.
Okay.
And you have to meet standards on everything. So they grade you on your driving, they grade you on your geography, they grade you on your shooting, they grade you on your defensive tactics, your classroom. You have to take written tests like you're in college. And the entire time you're in the academy, you're being paid.
Okay.
So that's a great draw for Springfield is they have their own academy and you're being paid as you're learning how to be a policeman.
Okay. Well, that makes it better. Yeah. So go ahead. Sorry.
And so in August, when you graduate, then you begin what we call the field training process.
Okay.
So that is FTO for short. And you start, so you're in uniform. You're a sworn police officer at that time. And you're what we would call a probationary officer. So you have to ride, you're paired with a veteran officer for 52 shifts.
Hmm.
So 52 times you ride with another policeman and he's grading you. And so you want to talk about stressful. I mean, it's like you're driving and he's sitting there and he's grading you on everything you're doing from how you use the radio, what you say on the radio, the path that did you take the best route to the call you're on? How did you handle the call when you got there? Did you have good officer safety? How was your communication with the victim or suspect? Did you use appropriate force when necessary? You name it, you're graded on. You're graded on it. So it is a pretty stressful time. But I will say that college prepared me for the police academy and what I was going to expect there. So, from the educational side of things, I did really well because of college on the educational side of the police academy. But prior to going to the academy, I'd never shot a gun, which they say if you've never shot a gun, that's who they want because they get to teach you from the ground up. You don't have bad
Sure.
habits and everything else like that, right?
Right.
So, you know, I had to learn those things. So college really prepared me for the classroom side of the academy, but the academy really prepares you of what you're going to expect on the street. And there is sometimes a disconnect. Like people can pass the academy, but then cannot translate the skills they've learned in the academy to actual every day being a police officer. And so it's a small percentage, but there is that reason why they have the field training process to make sure that you're not going to get yourself hurt or somebody else hurt, and that you're doing all the things that you learned appropriately.
What type of person would be able to take what they've learned in the academy and then successfully apply it when they're now in the field being observed?
Somebody that typically policemen are type A personalities. You
What?
know, you you have to be able to command or take control of a situation.
Hmm.
I remember a disturbance I went on. Probably it was my first week, and I was with my field training officer, and we went to a convenience store. And in the front of this convenience store, there was a group of people yelling at each other. And in my mind, I guess I thought when I showed up out there, everybody would stop yelling at each other. They would listen to the things that I said. They would, if I gave them commands, they would listen to those commands. You know what I'm saying? And it
Yeah.
was not like that at all.
Hmm.
And so I remember my field training officer writing in my report for that day that David needs to realize he's now the police. And that resonated with me throughout the course of my field training process. And still to this day, I remember that because it was, again, that light bulb moment that, hey, when you show up out here, you need to take control of it because nobody else is.
Right.
Like that's why they're calling you.
Hmm.
Is you got to gain control of this situation. And a lot of times you could just use your words to do that. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes people just don't listen to what you're saying, and you have to use physical force in order to gain control. And so the people, there's a parallel between military and policing is a paramilitary organization in and of itself, the
Hmm.
command structure, everything else like that. But there's a lot of similarities. So a lot of former military people do well in law enforcement just because they're used to the stress. They're used to a lot being expected of them. They're used to making tough decisions in split seconds. And so there's a lot of similarities there. I wasn't military. I didn't go through military. I didn't have that experience. So there was a learning curve for me, and I had to learn those things. And I'm grateful that I did. And I had good teachers back then and really showed me how to be a policeman. And I'm grateful for that. And so, because it is a really good career. If you do it properly, you can do it safely, but it's not for everyone.
Do you find that in scenarios like the example that you just shared, when you get to a scene like that, even people that normally would be quite reasonable and you could explain and discuss things with them, their emotions are just pegged at an 11 and they can't hear you even when you're screaming in their ear?
Yeah. And I try not to scream.
Well, yeah.
You never want to elevate and get to that level because you've
Right.
lost control if you do.
Yeah.
But you have to think about policing in this perspective. When you show up on a call for service, you're typically dealing with somebody on their worst day.
Yeah.
They've been a victim of a crime, they've been involved in a traffic accident. You're pulling them over on the way somewhere and they're getting a speeding ticket. They've just been involved in a domestic type situation where their loved one has betrayed them. I mean, think of all the scenarios in which the police are called, and hardly any of them are good, right? That's why everybody likes you guys better. Um, I
Ah,
mean, you guys are showing up and getting the cats out of the trees and all that kind of stuff, but we're showing up on their very worst day.
yeah.
And so you have to look at that and keep that in perspective when you show up and have that in your mind that they're not their self,
Yeah.
right? They're not their normal self. Their emotions are heightened, and you're trying to bring a control, but you're also trying to bring a calmness
Mm,
to that situation.
okay. So you have spent time with your FTO. You've gotten past your initial training. Now you are do they still call him a beat cop, or I don't even know what the term is, but you're out on
Yeah,
patrol, I
patrol
guess.
officer.
Oh, patrol
Yeah,
officer. Okay.
patrol officer. Yeah, but like you are a beat cop because you're driving. I don't know. I think they might call them districts now, but like you're driving a beat.
Okay.
You're assigned an area, especially right out of the academy when you get off of field training. You're on your own, and suddenly there's that revelation. I'm it. It's me,
Yeah.
and you're not riding with another person. We don't have partners here, so you're in a car by yourself. And it's the best feeling and the worst feeling at the same time
Yeah.
because it's the best feeling because there's that now that freedom.
Sure.
Now I go in service and I can go do whatever I want,
Hmm.
right? But it's also the worst feeling because it's like, how do I do this? How do I do that? If you think you can learn everything about being a policeman in a 6 months academy and 52 shifts, you got another thing coming. It is a daily learning process for years. I would say a patrolman really doesn't have the job mastered until year 2 or 3, maybe.
Hmm.
And so, because it's hard, and there may be sergeants out there that one of their officers is calling them about something, and they've never dealt with it because it's not like your normal job where it's like, okay, we can expect A, B, C, or D to happen. It's a million different things, a million different avenues it could go down. And so the sergeants are having to try to muddle through situations and go, okay, this is what we know. Let's do this. Right. But it
Right.
might be something in a 10, 12-year career they've never dealt with before. So, which is actually why the job is so fascinating
Yeah.
because you every single day, and if you ask policemen why they like to do the job, you're going to get a wide variety of answers, but you're going to get this answer from a lot of them. Every single day is different.
Yeah. Variety.
I
Yeah.
I'm not going, and your job is pretty similar too. There's a lot of like correlation there. We go out and you may show up on something and man, this is crazy. I've never seen anything like this before. And as long as you can, as long as you got a tough stomach and some common sense, you can get through a career in policing.
Yeah. So you're now on the beat. You're working in patrol. How long did you do that before you decided this area in law enforcement is of interest to me, or this promotional process, or kind of how did you walk through the next few steps of your promotional journey in law enforcement?
Sure. So I found that I like to be proactive right away. I wanted I wanted to chase bad guys, right? And I know that sounds cliche and maybe a little cheesy, but that was my thing, man. I wanted to put bad guys in jail, right? And so I got pretty proactive right away and started making traffic stops, starting learning what cars to stop, what to do. That's not an easy skill to learn, and they don't teach it in a class. You have to have a nose for criminal activity.
Okay.
And some guys really have it, and some guys, they get it or they acquire it over years or they do something different. But I really had a nose for criminal activity and wanted to succeed in making cases and getting drugs off the street, those kind of things. So I worked hard and I got noticed by so back then we had a special investigations unit, and I got noticed by their sergeant and put in for an opening there. And 3.5 years as a patrolman, I got the job, which is really hard now. It's tough. It's tough. It's probably those kind of jobs are a lot more competitive than maybe back then. So I got this job. This sergeant took a chance on me, and so here I am as a 3.5 year cop in the Special Investigations Unit as a detective. So when I say detective, I don't mean I was promoted. It's a promotion in stature, not in pay.
Okay.
I got to wear jeans and a t-shirt to work and drive an unmarked police car and operated out of a covert office. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I
When you
did.
say what exactly, I mean, I don't know how much you can elaborate, but what types of crimes did you typically focus on?
Sure. So there was we shared an office with the narcotics unit.
Okay.
So there was some drug aspects to what we did. We had a lot of gang responsibilities, gangs in Springfield. My area of specialty was motorcycle gangs, so I investigated them. We did vice crimes. We did some prostitution. The reason why we had such a generic name as Special Investigations Unit is because we did such a wide variety of different things, which is what
Hmm.
I really liked about it. We could be on one day working on a federal drug conspiracy case, and then the next week we're doing murder for hire surveillance, and then the next week we're running a prostitution sting. So there's like such a wide variety of different things we did, but it was probably the most fun that I had as a police officer in my career. It was run and gun, and you're not answering calls for service, so you're 100% proactive. You and you have to justify your existence, right? So
Right.
we had to do monthly reports that showed how many arrests we made, how much drugs we seized, how much stolen property we seized. So it was, but it wasn't stressful because once you start getting the hang of it over there, it's really fun. It's really fun.
How long did you do that for?
So I did that from 2001 to 2006, and I decided to test for corporal at that time, and I ended up getting promoted to corporal in 2006. Now, typically, uh, officers that are promoted to corporal will typically go back to the street and become a corporal on a patrol squad. But at the time, I think because of where I just had spent the last 5 years, I was asked to go to criminal investigations as a detective.
Okay.
So, criminal investigations is where you are investigating crime that, so a detective's assigned a case that of a crime that was already committed. So I went from 100% proactive to 100% reactive. Now I'm being assigned cases and have to follow up on them. And so my first, I was immediately assigned to, so I was given a choice: crimes against children or adult sex crimes. And neither one really, uh, like, I didn't want to do either one of them, honestly,
Yeah,
but
I wouldn't.
I especially didn't really want to work kid crimes. I never
Sure.
did. I've had some friends that have done them, and kudos to them. Somebody has to do them. I just didn't have the stomach for it. I thought, like, if I was sitting across from somebody that hurt kids, I would want to hurt them. And so
Yeah.
I decided to take the adult sex crimes route, which was then incorporated. Things are different now, but then was incorporated in what was called the Violent Crimes Unit. And so I was a sex crimes detective for 14 long months and learned a lot. I learned a lot on cases, case management, how to work cases, what cases would be charged, what cases wouldn't be charged. They were not easy cases to work. And so after that, there were some promotions in criminal investigations, and a spot opened up in robbery homicide. And I was selected to go to that spot.
Hmm.
So I was in robbery homicide. So now I'm working robberies and or homicides. And so I did that for about 2.5 years.
Did you enjoy
And
that part
that,
of it or?
yeah. So if I could go back and change one thing
Hmm.
about my policing career, I probably would have stayed there longer.
Why is that?
From a detective standpoint, from being a criminal investigator and spending 13 of my 25 years in criminal investigations, I can tell you the pinnacle of a detective's career is sitting across from somebody that murdered somebody else, and you're trying to get them to tell you what they did. You know what they did, and they know what they did. You're just trying to get them to. I really enjoyed the chess match of interviews and interrogations,
Hmm.
and trying to get somebody to confess to a crime. And think about the pressure on the line of those. Someone's this person did this crime, and there's these loved ones that really are suffering and want some justice, right? So you're trying to bring some closure to them, and you're trying to bring some justice to the person that committed these crimes. So it's kind of for me, and it's not probably the same for everybody, but for
Mm-hmm.
me, it was the pinnacle of my career. But I saw an opportunity to promote, and I tested for sergeant, and I was promoted to sergeant in 2009. And then I had been off the road, off of patrol for 8 years. I'd been in plain clothes for 8 years. So I'd spent more time in plain clothes than I had in uniform, but I was going back to patrol. So I went back to patrol as a sergeant and operated or ran a patrol squad. And I did that for a number of years. I worked almost every shift. I was a day shift sergeant. I was a second shift sergeant, which was 5 at night to 3 in the morning back then. I was an overnight sergeant. Um, and then our chief at the time, formed what we refer to as downtown squads. So they made two patrol squads that were specifically designed to work the downtown Springfield area. And so if you ever go downtown Springfield on a
Mm-hmm.
Friday, Saturday night, you're going to see police officers standing around. That was us. I was selected as one of the sergeants to run one of those two squads. It was kind of like a pilot type program. And they're still down there today. So that was fun, but I dealt with enough drunk college kids and homeless people for 2 years,
Yeah.
and I put in for uh, a criminal investigations position in. I actually had put back in for the special investigations sergeant opening, didn't get it. Then I put in for a property crime sergeant position and got it. So in 2011, I went to the property crimes unit as the supervisor
Hmm.
and worked as the criminal investigation sergeant in crimes against property for 5 years. So, which is a long time for that position, strictly because of the volume of property crime. I could tell you there's more property crime in Springfield than anything else. And the last year I was there, I think I read 14,000 police reports
Good
of property
grief.
crime. And I had 8 detectives. So
Man.
you think 8 detectives are going to work 14,000 cases? Of course not. So now I'm having to triage what cases I assigned, what cases I didn't assign.
Hmm.
And it's unfortunate. Property crime takes a back seat to crimes against. But you've
Sure.
got a person, you've got somebody that's killed, stabbed, assaulted, raped. Those take precedent over my car stolen, right? So you're having to make those the big picture. You're having to make those priority shifts of manpower. And so for me, I had my 8 guys, and we would work every case we could, and we worked some really big cases, and we did some really good things. But there's also a lot of cases we didn't work that I wish we could have because of manpower.
Yeah.
So then in 2017, I put in for lieutenant, and I was promoted to lieutenant and went back to patrol. So then I was a patrol lieutenant for several years. prior to my last assignment in my career, which was the lieutenant over the special investigations section.
You've had, as I listened to your story, you've had, I say jump around, not because that's not a negative. You just had a lot of different experiences. Did you ever think that I might want to try and go all the way to the top and become a police chief, or was that level not of interest to you?
No, that level was not of interest to me. So I put in for captain a couple of times, and I the last time I think I put in for captain twice, and the last time I put in for captain, I was no, the first time I put in for captain, I didn't get it, and instead was transferred to special investigations, which is to me by far the best lieutenant's job on the department because again, you're back. I was back to my origin. I was jeans and a t-shirt. I drove a covert vehicle. It was now I'm supervising all the guys that were doing the job that I did, 20 years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really cool assignment, and I was really grateful that I got to spend my last 3 years there. But as far as like jumping around, I highly recommend that to any police officer to avoid burnout
Oh,
because if you
hmm.
stay in the same role for think about it. When I became a sergeant, I had guys on my squad. All they did for 12 years, 15 years was be a street cop. They were still officers. They never promoted. They just drove a beat, same beat over and over and over again for 12, 13, 15 years. That will burn anybody out. I don't
Yeah,
care how much you love the job, doing that same thing over and over and over again. Now, there are unicorns out there that don't ever get burned out. They from day one to year 25, they love it. But for me, I needed those different opportunities to keep me going, to become well rounded. So if I'm now a lieutenant and I'm in charge of other guys, but I didn't have all the experiences that I had prior to promoting, how am I going to be a good supervisor?
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I supervisors are drawing from their experience. Now, I was never a SWAT guy. I was never on the SWAT team. And
Hmm.
so, when we had barricaded type situations or hostage type situations, like that's not my forte. I had knowledge to draw from and resources there to call and help me out and get me through situations. But at the end of the day, I pride myself on being well versed and having a lot of different opportunities to be as well rounded as I could.
The one thing that pops into my head when I hear you talking about those unicorn guys that they do the same beat for 20, 23, 25 years, whenever you're a captain and you're lucky enough to have just a firefighter that's been doing a firefighting job for 20, 22, 23 years, the experience and the knowledge, that guy's probably forgotten more than a 10-year captain has learned yet. And so
Yeah,
it's a nice resource to have, either if you're sitting next to them or if you're in charge of them. That's a great place to pull experience and knowledge from.
I remember my first patrol squad that I took over as a sergeant. These were some older, some crusty, some like just like they. I think I would have been seventh on that seniority list on that squad if you're looking just time on.
Hmm.
And now I'm the boss, and these guys, they've all been on the way longer than me, and so, but the knowledge that was there.
Yeah.
So like we get in situations, and there were four guys on that squad that had been on the full time SWAT team at some point in their career. So my biggest weakness was their strength. So as a supervisor, I'm like, hey guys, on these types of deals, I have the final say, but I'm leaning on you. I'm leaning
Yeah.
on your expertise in these types of situations. And so they knew that I was going to not require their help, but like I was going to ask them their opinion. And I think that's good leadership. I mean, to
Oh,
be
sure.
honest, I think,
Yeah.
any leader, thinks they know it all. They're not a good leader, right? So
Hmm.
I'm going to this squad hat in hand and going, guys, I've been off the street 8 years. You have the most seniority of any squad in the department. So I'm going to sit back and let you do your thing and learn a lot from you. And I did. And so I think that was essential for me and helped me jumpstart my supervisor career.
You're blessed to have guys like that if they're willing to look out for each other. Boy, that's nice to have a deep bench of experience like that.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So you've moved on. Let's say you're getting close to, if I'm following your timeline right, you're getting close to retirement, 25 years with the Springfield Police Department. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, I did. I've retired.
Right.
So, in my journey in the
Yes.
story, yeah, that I'm
Yes.
telling here,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So I spent my last 3 years in criminal investigations. I was in the special investigations section, which incorporates narcotics, special investigations unit, and organized crime and vice. And so during that time, I went through the a little bit before I got there and after I got there. The chief wants all of his commanders, and still to this day, to go through command college, which is a college for commanders throughout the state. And they convene in Jefferson City, Missouri, at the Police Chiefs Association. And it's like a school. And you go there for 1 week a month for 7 months.
Hmm.
And they have a program with Lincoln University out of Jefferson City. And each week you go there, you write a paper, and then you get credit towards a master's degree.
Wow.
So when I graduated from command college, I had maybe 2 years left uh, as a policeman, and I needed 5 classes to finish my master's degree. So I could do it all online. And
Yeah.
so, I've tried to model for my kids. You should always try to better yourself. Did I want to go get a master's degree at age 48 years old? No, I did not. Do I think it has benefited me at all to this day? Probably not. I don't know.
Yeah. But
But
you're
what I
close.
will, yeah. What I will say is that this goes for anybody in any profession. You should always be looking to try to better yourself. How can I better myself?
Yeah.
Even a police chief or somebody that's at the top should always be looking to try to make themselves better, and not just at the job, but as a person. Like, what can I do to make myself better? So I've tried to model that for my boys, and that was one of the motivations to get my master's degree. And so I was able to complete that in 2021.
Okay.
So pretty proud of that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you should be. It. So you've finished up your career with the Springfield Police Department. You have 25 years on the books. You've got your degree. You're going into retirement. What's next? Did you have a plan when you were retiring and you just kind of stepped into your current position, or did you just take a year or two off, or how did that transition go?
So it was kind of seamless, honestly. And in my eyes, a God thing. It was for me. Uh, I did some things when I did some volunteering when I was a police officer,
Okay.
different capacities. The I used to do the basketball team with big brothers and big sisters and organize
Hmm.
those games against you guys,
Yeah.
and different things like that. And it brought me to a place where I did some volunteering. There was a huge event at the fairgrounds, and some my name got floated to help them with security. And so it was Convoy of Hope had reached out to me, or a representative of, and asked if I would help them with their site security for their event at the fairgrounds. And so I went to a meeting, and I was like, sure, I'll help you with this. So over the course of however many years that was ago, I did several events with Convoy of Hope on a volunteer basis, helping them with some different site security. At the same time, through the reason why I call it a God thing, it was just a series of events that I met the president of Convoy of Hope. And we developed a relationship and would have lunch together a couple of times a year. He did a ride along with me, and I was able to show him the department and some different things like that. And he's a great man. And probably about 2 years before I was going to retire, we were having lunch, and he was like, hey, when you leave the police department, he knew I was finishing up. And he
Yeah.
said, when you leave, I'd like for you to come work at Convoy.
Hmm.
And I said, I'd love to. I love your organization. So the last year that I worked there at the police department, they hired me as a consultant. So I was doing like some probably 10 to 15 hours a month, I think it was. And I was doing, just some different consulting on they were building that building out in Republic. And so I was doing some different things, and I did some executive protection on a trip to El Salvador with some donors, and I thought it was great. And that led to them offering me a full-time position. So I retired March 31st of 2023 and started work for Convoy of Hope May 1st of 2023. So I actually took 1 month off and
Yeah.
went to Mexico with my wife for 4 or 5 days. And honestly, by the time the end of April rolled around, I was pretty bored.
Yeah.
Uh,
I've heard
I
that a lot from people that retire.
I just don't think I mean I'm 50, going to be 51 in a couple months, and
Hmm.
I can't see me just sitting at home, man. I don't know how guys do it, but that
Yeah.
to each his own. Like
Sure.
I just don't. For me, I'm going to work until I have enough money not to work, or I can't work. And
Yeah.
so that's and I don't know that the whole future will for me will be at Convoy. I don't know whatever God tells me to do, but for me, it's like uh, I feel like I belong there right now, and it's been a very very unique transition. So imagine going from the structure at the police department and working for city government with the policies and the procedures in place and the red tape and all that to corporate security. Now, Convoy of Hope is a 30-year organization. 28 and a half years, they didn't have security. So they hired me and another guy who's a retired Fed to kind of build the security program up at Convoy. And so now I'm going from policing and structure and command structure and chain of command and all that stuff to no structure, hardly, and going to corporate security, but not just corporate security, faith based corporate security. So a lot of people that work, it's viewed as a ministry. And so a lot of people that work there have been in the ministry before. They've been pastors, they've been missionaries. So I say that to say, I mean, I love the people of the organization, but they see things through a pretty different lens than I do.
Was that a hard shift to make to go from the surrounded by type A's and everything and structure and, go, go, go to like a 180 as far as your work environment?
It was and still is. I love the organization. I love what they do.
Yeah.
They do a lot of disaster. A lot of people think of Convoy of Hope. They think of, oh, there's a tornado. They're going to be on the ground. Oh, there's a hurricane in the US. They're going to be on the ground. But they do a lot more than that. The depth of that organization, I don't even think I knew until I started working there. It's a global organization. They got 650 employees, 250 of which are global. They're in other countries.
Hmm.
We have program in 37 other countries. We feed 620,000 kids 1 meal a day every school day, 5 days a week.
Wow.
And they're wanting to get to 1 million kids by 2030. So While the transition has been interesting and difficult at times, the mission is why I'm there. And
Yeah.
it's an unbelievable organization, and I love what they do. And it's not perfect by any means, but no place is. And I truly, the heart of everyone there, like I said, the mission. You could go and visit the building and look at the food in the warehouse and go, wow, that's a lot of boxes, a lot of food, and this is huge. But then when you see the food on a plate in some kid's hands in Africa or Guatemala or Nicaragua or one of the places we have program, it's life changing.
Yeah.
And it's where I know I'm supposed to be at this point in time.
I was talking with a retired fireman just a couple of weeks ago, and he's out in California with all the fires out there. And he shares a lot of the same sentiments that you do about just the size and scope of Convoy of Hope is a little bit misunderstood. And when you get involved in it and you see it from the inside out, it takes on a whole different viewpoint.
Yeah, it really does. It's just, it's pretty dynamic. And think of all the logistics that have to go in,
Oh, yeah.
into not only, we've shipped truckload after truckload to people, supplies in the wildfires in California. We're still in North Carolina working with churches for Hurricane Helene.
Hmm.
And at the same time, we're feeding kids around the world. It's just, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
That's got to be satisfying. And I think you've had two careers that give you some satisfaction that you're actually making a difference, even if it's just in one person's life. You're planting that seed kind of a thing.
Yeah, I do feel pretty blessed in that regard. It, being a police officer is serving your community.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've transitioned to a different type of service,
Hmm.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. As far as career goes, if someone wanted to get into law enforcement, do you have any little tidbits of information that maybe isn't in the brochure or maybe that you don't realize going into the academy or when you start? Is there some guiding principle or a phrase or just a method of doing or being that allowed you to be successful in your different departments that you were in and your promotional opportunities and stuff like that?
That's a great question, Tim. And I'm glad you asked me because, yes, there is. So for years, I sat on the panel to interview new hires. So people that wanted to be policemen, you have to sit on an interview with three people that were police officers and one from human resources.
Okay.
And I sat on that panel for a number of years as an officer. And what helps you or guides you to a successful career in policing? Prior to it, we could teach anybody how to be a policeman,
Yeah.
but I had my, so I highly recommend doing a ride along first. I mentioned that earlier, but I also recommend try to get into the customer service field, whether it's waiting tables or places that you have to deal with people, and people are difficult. There's
Yeah.
difficult people. Just think about it. Just think about it. Think about the last time you were at a restaurant when you overheard somebody giving a waitress or a waiter difficulty, right? It
Hmm.
happens all the time.
Yeah.
And so you have to learn how to deal with difficult people. When I was a college student, I was during the summers. My parents moved back to the city, to New York City. They were living in Brooklyn and working for a Christian organization called Teen Challenge. It's a drug rehabilitation program. And so I was going back to Brooklyn during the summers and I was working at Teen Challenge. And that was huge for me because I was, a lot of the people there were court ordered. So I was dealing with a lot of the personality types and a lot of the different things that I would see later on in a policing career, if that makes sense. also the internships that I did with the Mayor's Commission on Human Rights and the internship with Springfield really prepared me for investigations. It really prepared me for what I was going to see. I didn't have any surprises. So there's sometimes I sit on an interview panel and I'm like, how did you apply for a job as a police officer? They
Yeah.
really didn't have that. You can look at me and go, well, he took class in high school, then he took criminal justice classes in college, and then he did A, B, and C internships, and he worked here and he did this. It's kind of like a path to that job, right?
Hmm.
There's some people that just, I was a window washer and then I did this for a little while and now I want to be a policeman. And you're like, do you even know what this, like, do you know anything about this job?
It can't
And
be an
you're,
impulse. Yeah.
no, it's not, right? And so,
Right.
like I said, it's not for everybody. So I would like several times on that panel, I would be like, have you ever done a ride along? And they would be like, well, no, no. I go, I'm going to set you up with a guy after you're done with this interview. And then, because we can't afford to hire someone and then them 2 months later realize, this isn't for me. We want to know that on the front end, right? We want those guys that they know what they're getting into and nothing's a surprise for them
Hmm.
when they start the job. My advice would be seek out those things that are going to best prepare you for a career of policing, which could include customer service type jobs. And like I said, it could be waiting tables at a restaurant. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be, I worked as a probation and parole officer. It doesn't have to be something that specific related to
Hmm.
criminal justice. It has to be very customer service related. And then look at those things those educational opportunities, if you are in college, like an internship, that will help you to navigate that job.
When people would come in and the panel that you were just describing that you sit on for the interview process, are you usually able to tell within the first couple of minutes this person has what we're looking for? This person is, we might be able to help develop them, turn them into what we want, and this person is not a good fit for you and you need to make a 180 and go elsewhere? Is it usually pretty obvious early on?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes you're like, yep, right away,
Yeah.
right? You're like, they're going to be fine.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're like, man, I don't know. But I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know what they thought about me when I went through. Now, I had done those things. Like I said, I checked those boxes, but I was pretty green.
Yeah.
I was not in the military. I'd never shot a gun before. Uh, Fighting was very limited for me. But I did 25 years there. And then there were guys that were gung ho and were cadets. And like, you're like, man, this guy's a cop for life. And then, 3 years later, they find another job and go somewhere else and do something else completely different. Right. So you never know. You
Yeah.
never know. But I would say, I pride myself being a pretty good judgment of people. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, a lot of times you can go, man, I don't know. I don't know if this is for you. I wouldn't say that, but
Yeah.
then, sometimes, beyond a shadow of a doubt, you're like, this guy's going to be squared away.
Do you find that most cops, and they're probably going to get upset if you share any locker room secrets, but are they mostly extroverts? Do you have a lot of introverts that when they take off their job persona that they portray to the public, do you typically find one personality style that is in law enforcement or is pretty much anybody?
I think I would say that if anything, and I say, there's a lot of different personality types that could be good police officers. There's
Hmm.
guys that are introverted and quiet to guys that, would be an excellent car salesman because they're very outspoken, very friendly,
Yeah.
so there's every different personality trait under the sun. But what I will say is that what the job does to somebody over the years in my experience, kind of turns them a little introverted. Cops don't like to be in big crowds. They don't like to be around a lot of people. They have a circle of friends that are usually other cops. And I tried to not do that. I was told that early on, and I remember that. So I try to always keep a circle of friends that are both police and not police, if that makes sense. And
Yeah, it
so,
does.
but there's a lot of like traits like that that I think happen to policemen over time because the job will change you as a person. You become very cynical. You know, you're seeing the evil of the world every single day, right? So it's not. That's why it's not for everybody. But the people of this world need protectors, and they need people to step in and protect them from the wolves, right? And so that's what policemen do. And it's not for everybody, but at the end of the day, it does take its toll. So I would say, as far as personality, any personality can do it, but it does change you over time as a person.
Yeah, there's some similarities there to fire, ambulance, things of that nature. Any type of a first responder that's out kind of in the middle of some of the
Absolutely.
disasters. Just you see things that unfortunately is just part of the job and nobody should have to see. And it can't help but change you. It's how you process it, how you deal with it, finding a healthy outlet for that as opposed to turning to alcohol or drugs or any other unhealthy behaviors. That's
Right.
usually a big part of it. But
Yeah, they say that like we most people deal with a critical incident about 10 times in their life, and they say policemen are dealing with critical incidents about 150 times during a career. And I would say that, you had mentioned fire and paramedics is about the same. I mean,
yeah,
it's this first responders, generally speaking, have to deal with way more things than people have to deal with in a lifetime
yeah.
or should deal with.
What's your best advice to deal with failure? Everybody makes mistakes in their career. Everybody makes the wrong decision. Sometimes, even with the best information, you look back and go, that was not the right decision to make. But how
Sure.
you handle it after you make a mistake is usually a big chunk of it. What would you advise someone who, you know, either in law enforcement or in your current occupation? How do you deal with failure?
Well, for me, advice would be for a younger officer, a younger officer is make sure that you learn from your mistakes. And so when I was a field training officer, or when I was a probationary officer, and I told you about that story, I'll go back to that story again where they said David needs to really realize he's the police, right?
Yeah,
The key for me there is okay, he's right. I did that wrong. I don't want to make that mistake again. The people that don't succeed off of field training are the ones that make mistakes repeatedly. They consistently are doing the wrong thing, even they don't learn from them. And so, I guess what I'm trying to say is always be trying to learn from your mistakes because everybody makes them. No one is perfect.
yeah,
Everybody is going to make the wrong call, and you need to own your stuff. And if you make a bad decision, say, yep, that was my decision. It was the wrong one. And then learn from it, but don't repeat it. And
yeah,
so that would be my advice, for really anyone in any field is, be prepared for failure. Failure is what builds character, what builds you up, what builds people, but it also makes you like stronger in the fact that okay, now I have to overcome this, but I
yeah,
don't want to feel like that again. I don't
sure.
want to. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Now, could you make another mistake down the road, something completely different? Yes, but as you make mistakes in life, and I tell this to my kids, you're going to make mistakes, but learn from them and become better for it and move on.
That's there's a general theme with my interviews that I've noticed when I ask folks that have a solid career behind them like you do, that there's that one phrase, everybody makes mistakes, you have to own it. That own it part, I think, it sometimes goes against our human nature. We just want a knee jerk reaction is to defend ourselves and deflect and, not try and look as bad as we look right now. We've got egg all over our face and it's embarrassing, and you just want to, you know, explain it away. Sometimes it's best to just stand there with the egg on your face and go, "Yep, I made it. This is my mess. I'm sorry. How can I move forward?"
Yep. I would agree with that. I think everybody's worked for a supervisor that doesn't and shifts
Yes.
blame and
Yep.
blames you and it's their mistake, and no one wants that.
No.
If you make the mistake, you need to own it for sure.
Those supervisors that are quick to throw their people under the bus, usually nobody wants to work for them, and yeah, it just never goes well for their career.
It's true. Very true.
Is there a career, if you look back to when you were a teenager, it seems like you pretty much had law enforcement on your radar from day one, but was there something else? And I'm not talking about like being a rock star or, a professional sports athlete or whatever, but was there another career that you kind of had your eye on that maybe would have been your second choice?
Wow, I really don't know. It's funny because I look back on it and I don't know what else I would have done.
Yeah.
I honestly do not know what else I would do if I wasn't doing this. And it's, I see, because now, because of manpower issues, we have a rehire program, and I see guys that are retiring and going back to the police department. Why are they doing that? Isn't 25 years enough? They're doing that because they don't know what else to do.
Right.
And it's not easy to do something for that long and then all of a sudden go do something completely different. Now, there's a lot of similarities in what I was doing and what I am doing now, even though the jobs are completely different. There's some similarities, but as far as like what would I do, I don't know. I think I would like to own a business or like do something for myself if I was be my own boss.
Hmm.
And I don't even know what that would look like. I really don't. I don't have any idea of what that would look like, but it seems like I know guys that are doing that, and I know how happy they are, even though
Right.
it's probably pretty stressful. You got to earn your own money and be
Hmm.
successful that way. But at the end of the day, there's got to be some kind of satisfaction with making a business successful and that kind of thing. But I don't know. It's hard. That's hard.
Do
That's
you
a tough question.
Well, do you find that cops, when they leave law enforcement, you talked about the guys that were retiring and then coming back, do you think they miss the camaraderie? Because if I look at the fire service, I don't miss going on calls. I wouldn't miss getting woken up in the middle of the night. I'm sleeping perfectly fine. And then I have to get up and go do my job, but that's what I get paid for. But I do enjoy my coworkers, the camaraderie, the fun that we have, and firehouse life is its own unique deal. And I can see, when I'm old and grayer, that's the thing that I will miss the most. I can only assume it's the same in law enforcement.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, what
Yeah.
do they say? I'll miss the clowns, but not the circus. I
Yeah.
mean,
That's a good
it's
way to put it.
it's it's the same for me,
Mm.
and I try. I have to be better and more intentional about my lifelong friends and being in touch with them and talking to them,
Mm.
and keeping in touch. Because life goes on, and then all of a sudden I've gone to a couple of retirement parties this year and some different things like that. I get to go back and I get to see the all the people. The thing is, our department's pretty good at doing things like every year they have a Christmas lunch. High Street Baptist, I think, does it for us, and all of the retirees come out of the woodwork. And you get to go there and see all the current police officers, and you get to go there and see all the guys that you worked with when you were there as well. And then we have like a ball in the in the in the spring, and it's kind of like a dress up, suit and tie event. But like you go there, and it's again, it's the same thing. They include the retirees in some of the things, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then you get to have a certification, but you have to qualify once a year, and they only do it twice in a year, but you have to do it once. So like you're going out there with all the retirees and shooting, and it's kind of fun. So they do a lot of things to kind of still keep us in the loop, so to speak. But like,
Hmm.
we get, because I don't really care about the job anymore, man. I 25 years, I had a gutful,
Yeah.
but I mean, I developed so many relationships. I have so many friends, so many guys that I respect and call a friend, and I, it's hard to keep in touch with them all, but like that's an important aspect of retiring. I mean, you have to stay in contact with those guys.
That brotherhood can continue on long past your final paycheck, I'm sure.
It can, and it does.
Hey, the Convoy of Hope stuff that you were talking about a little bit ago with the meals, the wildfires, the hurricane response in North Carolina, I can only assume that the Convoy of Hope has a donation page where folks, if they want to donate to the Convoy of Hope, can they go just to the website and is it pretty easy to find?
Yes, absolutely. It's convoyofhope.org.
Okay.
And we are, it's a nonprofit, faith-based organization that we're really trying to make a difference in the world. And it's a really good, if you're looking for a place, if you're a business looking for a place for to be a part of. We'd love to hook up with you, give you a tour of the building, and if you're not local and you want to, it's an organization you want to know more about, get behind, just go to convoyofhope.org. I appreciate that plug for them. I do.
Yeah, I mean, in the Springfield area, everybody knows Convoy of Hope. They're a very well-respected organization. I don't have any affiliation with them. I'm not being paid to say this or anything like that. But it's pretty easy to get on board with helping folks that their houses and everything that they own is burned to the ground or flooding or a hurricane or whatever has wiped everything away. Americans are pretty good. We put the political stuff aside. When
Yep.
disaster hits, everybody steps up to the plate to help one another. And that's one thing that I've always liked about our country. So when an
And when there
organization
are
like
disasters,
yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry, when there are disasters, they will allow you to donate specifically to those. So, unless I'm mistaken, I think I'm not, but you could go on their website and donate specifically to
Oh,
the
okay.
fires or
Okay.
a hurricane or things like that. So, fairly certain. And you could always call in and you could do donations over the phone and things like that as well.
Okay. Awesome. Hey, thanks for your time today, David. I really appreciate it. That was a lot of awesome information, and hopefully some
Cool.
folks will donate to the Convoy of Hope. That's a worthwhile
Yeah, right.
organization I support 100%. So,
Well, thanks, Tim. I appreciate you having me. And yeah, it was great. Thank you.
all right. Have a good day.
You too.
And that wraps up another episode of the Jobs Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully, you found that interesting. As always, I wait until the end of an interview to ask you to like, subscribe, and share. I feel it's important that I earn that support from you. Thanks again, and we will see you on the next one.